The red scarf returned every night, and so did she. Reddit drama mystery. Before I ever set foot in apartment 7B, I had only heard whispers about what had happened there. Neighbors exchanged stories in hushed tones, passing tales like currency in the dimly lit stairwells. They said the last tenant vanished without warning, left everything behind, groceries still in the fridge, shoes at the door. A scarf, bright red, draped across the arm of the couch as if someone had just stepped out to run an errand and never came back. I should have taken the stories more seriously, but when the rental price dropped again and again until it was almost laughable, I stopped caring about legends. I was desperate, broke, and trying to outrun my own past. So I signed the lease. First thing I noticed stepping in was the smell. Not rot or mold like I feared from an abandoned unit, but something artificial like a hint of perfume mixed with electric ozone. It clung to the air, to my clothes, to the back of my throat. The walls were freshly painted, but the old wooden floors had a nervous creak to them. It was as if they didn't want to hold my weight, like they remembered the last person who stood here, and maybe resented me for replacing them. I unpacked quickly, threw sheets over the mattress, plugged in my kettle, and made a half-hearted attempt at pretending this was home. I didn't notice the scarf until nightfall. It wasn't on the couch like the stories claimed. No, it was folded neatly on the top shelf of the bedroom closet. I didn't own anything that color. It was a violent red, almost unnatural. I touched it out of impulse, expecting to be dusty or brittle, but it felt freshly washed. Soft, warm, even. I should have thrown it away, burned it. But instead, I left it there, thinking it was just some forgotten remnant, too insignificant to matter. The first night was sleepless. Not because of noise, quite the opposite. The silence was so complete, it created pressure in my ears, like the apartment was sealed off from the rest of the building or the world. I thought I heard a thump once, around 3:17 a.m., but when I stepped out into the living room, nothing had moved. The kettle sat unplugged. The closet remained shut. The red scarf was still folded exactly how I left it. The next morning, I chalked it up to nerves. City life wears you down, and moving after years of chaos can make you paranoid. I told myself I needed to breathe. I needed a routine. So I got dressed, went to the local market, bought some eggs and milk, tried to act like someone who belonged in that neighborhood. When I came back, the kettle was plugged in. That stopped me cold. It wasn't just plugged in. It was halfway filled with water, and someone had turned it on. It clicked off as I stood there staring. The steam danced like breath in the still air. I checked the locks. Deadbolts secure. Chain latched windows shut. No sign of forced entry. I was alone. Or at least I had been. That night, I moved the scarf. Not out of fear, but defiance. I wanted to see if someone, was trying to play games with me. I tucked it behind a stack of old books on the bottom shelf of the hallway cabinet. Pushed it so far back my fingers scraped the wall. I even snapped a photo of the hiding spot, just to be sure. At 2:44 a.m., I woke up with a start. My ears rang. The same silence, too complete. I padded into the hallway barefoot. Every board seemed louder underfoot. I opened the cabinet slowly, breath shallow. The books were there. But the scarf wasn't. Instead, it lay draped over the back of the couch. Exactly where the stories said it always was. That's when I began documenting everything. Photos, voice memos, notes on my phone. I started timing the events, looking for patterns. The scarf would move each night, but only if I tried to hide it. Leave it alone, and it stayed still. Touch it, and it reappeared somewhere else. Always somewhere visible. Always somewhere it wanted to be seen. One evening, while reviewing the footage from the hallway cam I had installed, I saw something that made my skin crawl. Between 1:23 and 1:24 am, the camera flickered, just for a second. When the image returned, the cabinet door was slightly ajar. No figure, no motion, just that subtle shift, that opening, and then the red flash on the edge of the frame, like the scarf being pulled away. I began sleeping with the lights on. My days grew blurry. I lost track of time, missed work emails, ignored texts. Friends noticed, but I had no explanation that didn't make me sound insane. My apartment is haunted by a scarf wasn't exactly the cry for help anyone took seriously. So I stopped reaching out. I became obsessed. Every evening became a ritual. Move the scarf, hide it, document its return. But then I made a mistake. I burned it. I set it ablaze in the bathtub one night, lighter fluid and all. The flames devoured it faster than I expected. No smoke, no ashes. It was as if the thing wanted to burn. I felt triumphant. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Until 3:17 a.m. the smell woke me. That perfume ozone blend, but heavier now, like a storm brewing behind my walls. I sat up. The lights were out, despite me leaving them on. I reached for my phone. Dead, not low battery. Just nothing. I crept into the living room. A low hum filled the air like electricity searching for a ground. And there in the center of the rug was the scarf, whole, unburnt, and unfurled like a line drawn in the sand. That was the first time I saw her. A woman, standing in the hallway mirror. Not behind me, within the glass itself, like a shadow painted across the reflection. Pale face, mouth closed but eyes wild. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. Her arms were wrapped in red, not a scarf anymore. Bandages. I stepped closer. My own reflection disappeared. Only hers remained. That's when I realized the mirror wasn't reflecting anything anymore. It was a window. She raised one hand, touched the glass from her side. My breath hitched. I didn't touch it back. I ran. I left the apartment in bare feet and pajamas, bolting down the stairs like a madman. I didn't return that night, or the one after. But I couldn't stay away forever. My things were still inside, my wallet, my ID, my entire life. On the third day, I returned. In the morning, bright daylight, people milling about in the halls. Normalcy like a shield. I unlocked the door with trembling fingers. Everything looked the same. Nothing had moved. Until I stepped into the bedroom. On the wall above my bed, written in something that looked like charcoal or soot, were 5 words. Why yo wo it lost tam'd. I didn't remember. Not clearly, but flashes came back in waves. A red scarf. A hand gripping mine. A woman's scream. My voice yelling something. The edge of a bathtub. Water going red. I staggered back into the hallway. An older neighbor stood there, frowning. She looked me over like I was a puzzle with a missing piece. "You shouldn't be in there," she said softly. "That place never lets go." I tried to speak. Tried to ask her what she meant. But she just shook her head and stepped past me. Her keys jingled. Her shoes clicked. And for just a second I saw it, peeking out of her coat pocket. A thread of red. Frayed. Familiar. I turned back to the apartment. The door had closed. I hadn't touched it. But it clicked shut with a finality that echoed through my spine. I was still holding the key. But somehow I knew it wouldn't fit anymore. Not this time. I didn't sleep that night. Not even with the key gripped tightly in my hand and the apartment locked behind me. I wandered the streets, circling the same blocks again and again, the city's usual roar muffled, as if something pressed against my ears from within. I kept thinking about the message on the bedroom wall. Yawo wo it lost temum, and what it meant. I had no memory of ever wearing the scarf, not even a trace. But something inside me stirred, something old and buried. A memory not quite mine. It was like looking at a photograph of yourself in a place you've never been, smiling at a stranger you don't recognize. The next morning I returned. Not to move back in, but to confirm what I saw wasn't a hallucination. I walked the hallway slowly, the air thicker the closer I got to the door. I expected it to be locked. It wasn't. The door creaked open at my touch. Inside, everything was exactly as I left it. No writing on the wall. No scent. No scarf. The mirror was normal again. Just a mirror. It was almost disappointing, like waking from a nightmare only to find yourself craving the terror again just to prove it was real. I walked from room to room, whispering to myself like a lunatic. You wore it last time. What last time? Was it symbolic, metaphorical, or literal? I pulled down boxes, open cabinets, empty drawers. Nothing red. No scarf. No bandages. Just dust and the low ticking of the wall clock I hadn't set. At exactly 3:17 p.m. the hands stopped. I didn't see them freeze. I only noticed the ticking had vanished. I looked up and saw the second hand suspended like a breath held too long. A moment stretched. I took a step forward, and the air changed. Pressure dropped. My ears popped. The walls didn't move, but they seemed closer. More present, like they were listening, like they were waiting. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and the sound shattered the stillness. I pulled it out with shaking hands. One notification, a photo. No sender. No timestamp. I opened it. The image was of me sleeping, in my own bed, face turned slightly away, mouth half open. A red scarf wound around my neck, pulled tight enough to leave a mark. I dropped the phone. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The air was too thick for sound. I stumbled back out of the apartment, not even bothering to lock the door. I fled. Again. This time I didn't return for a week. I stayed with a friend across town, barely speaking, barely eating. My phone didn't buzz again. The image was gone when I checked the next morning. The clock app said it was 3:17 a.m. and wouldn't change no matter what I did. I deleted it, reinstalled it. Nothing helped. The device wasn't broken. Everything else worked. But time had stopped, at least for me. I wasn't living hours anymore. I was living repetitions. Everything began to loop, same dreams, same subway ads, same face passing me on the same corner. I started checking apartment listings again, pretending I could just pick up and leave. But something pulled at me. Something wasn't finished, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. On the 8th day, I visited the building superintendent, a tired man in his 50s who looked like he stopped caring years ago. I asked him about apartment 7B. At first, he acted like he didn't remember. Then, when I pressed, his face changed. He told me there was no 7B, that the floor numbers jumped 7A to 70C. No one had lived in 7B for over a decade, he said. Then, quieter, we stopped leasing it after the fire. My throat went dry. What fire? I asked. He looked at me like I should already know. Woman lived there. Alone. Never left. One day, smoke started pouring from the vents. By the time we got the door open, it was too late. Nothing left but the bathtub and the mirror. No sign of her body. He rubbed his temple and added, red fabric stuck in the drain. I asked to see the lease I signed. He pulled it from a metal cabinet, handed it to me. My name was there. The address said apartment 70C. I know what I saw. I know what key I used. I held it in my hand. I held it every night. It said 70B, but now it said 70C. The key itself had changed. I left his office shaken. When I walked back to the building, I tested the key. It unlocked 70C, a completely different unit. Smaller, darker, no mirror in the hallway. I stepped inside numb, sat on the couch, looked around. This wasn't my home. And yet, my furniture was here, my groceries, my unpacked boxes, the kettle, the scarf, folded on the coffee table like it never left. I picked it up, holding it in the light. The fabric shimmered subtly, like threads were woven with something metallic. It pulsed slightly in my hands, and not metaphorically. It had a rhythm, a heartbeat. I clutched it to my chest, and for the first time, I remembered. Not flashes, not hints. A full memory. Her name was Lena. We lived together in the unit before the renovation, years before the fire. She was quiet, an artist. She painted strange things. Mirrored eyes, headless torsos, buildings with no exits. We fought often, mostly about the scarf. It had been her mother's. She wore it always, even in summer. Said it helped her feel present. One night, we argued so viciously the neighbors knocked to complain. She had accused me of stealing her sketchbook. I didn't, not then. But I had looked inside it before, seen the drawings. I told her they were madness, that she needed help. She slapped me. I remember the sting. I remember the scream. I remember her falling, slipping. No, being pushed. Maybe both. She hit her head, the corner of the tub. The sound of skull on porcelain. The scarf came off in my hand. I didn't call anyone. I panicked. Ran. By the time I came back, hours later, the apartment was empty. No body. Just water. Red water. I left the scarf in the drain. And I forgot. Or I made myself forget. And now the apartment had brought it back, piece by piece. The scarf. The woman in the mirror. The key. Time. All circling, closing. I sat for a long time, holding the memory like a wound. I knew what I had to do. That night I lit candles. Not for ritual, but clarity. I placed the scarf in the center of the living room. Spoke aloud her name. Apologized. Not just for the death, but for the forgetting. For pretending she hadn't mattered. For letting time erase her. The mirror in the hallway grew cold. I stepped up to it. My reflection stared back. No tricks, no distortions. Just me. But then I saw the corner of red, just behind my shoulder. In the glass, the scarf floated in the air, twisting slowly, rising. I turned. Nothing. Looked back. She was there again. Not angry. Just watching. Her face held grief, but no malice. She nodded once. Then faded. The mirror cracked. Not shattered. Just a hairline like a healed fracture. I checked the scarf. Gone. It's gone. The clock ticked again. 3:18. For the first time in weeks, time moved forward. The air felt lighter. The lights stayed on. I fell asleep that night without fear, but in the morning something new waited for me. On the coffee table, where the scarf had been, lay a different object. A sketchbook, bound in leather. My name was written on the cover in her handwriting. I opened it. Inside were hundreds of drawings, all of me. Sleeping, sitting, talking to people I didn't remember, standing in front of doors that didn't exist. The last page was blank, except for one sentence in red ink. Tell it right this time. I don't know what that means yet. But I've started drawing, not because I'm good at it, because I need to, because every line I make feels like a door creaking open, and I think someone is waiting on the other side. The days that followed felt quieter, but not in the peaceful sense, more like the hush that precedes something inevitable, a pause before a wave crests and crashes. I tried to live normally. I really did. I made coffee in the mornings, stared out the window at the street below, walked to the market just to hear the sound of other people's voices. But each time I returned to the apartment, I felt eyes on my back. Not watching in the obvious sense, but aware of me, like the space itself remembered who I was now, or maybe who I had been. The sketchbook remained on the table. I hadn't opened it since the morning I found it. Something about the weight of it, the way the leather felt too warm, the way the pages gave off a faint scent of burnt paper and rain-soaked fabric, made me avoid it like a person avoids an unspoken truth, but still I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. It felt alive in some way, not breathing exactly, but expectant, as if it knew I would return to it. One night, I finally did. The apartment had gone eerily still again. No hum from the fridge, no cars outside. The light bulb above the hallway flickered for a second and then steadied. I sat on the floor, pulled the sketchbook into my lap, and began flipping through it. The drawings were sharper now, more detailed. Not just scenes, they were moments, expressions, emotions, pain rendered in graphite. My face caught mid-yawn, my eyes wide with fear, my silhouette standing in doorways I had never seen before but felt like I knew. The final page had changed. It wasn't blank anymore. Now there was a drawing of the building, the outside. Except it wasn't quite right. The architecture was distorted. Angled windows, too many floors, staircases curling impossibly upward, and on the bottom floor a small red mark, a door. Not the one I used. A different entrance entirely. I flipped back to the front and noticed something else. At the top corner of each page was a tiny numeral, like a timestamp, written faintly in the same red ink. Not dates, coordinates, a sequence. They made no sense, at least not yet, but they were there, and they were changing. I checked them again an hour later and saw they had shifted. Slightly, like a countdown or a clock moving against logic. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with every light on, the sketchbook closed, but beside me. I tried to watch something on my laptop to distract myself, but the screen glitched every time I opened a file. Just static, then black. When I tried to restart it, the fan revved and then died. No light. No light. No power. I pressed my palm against the sketchbook, not sure why. And that's when I heard it, a knock. Not on my front door, on the wall, behind the mirror. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. I moved like someone hypnotized. Stood up, walked into the hallway. The mirror was normal. No woman inside, no fractures beyond that hairline crack. But the knocking resumed. Louder now. Insistent. I placed my ear to the glass and listened. There was something else. Breathing. Wet and slow like lungs submerge. I stepped back. And the mirror blinked. I swear it. One pulse. One flicker of darkness like an eyelid closing and reopening. Then everything was still again. I ran my fingers along the frame. It didn't budge, but a small strip of paper had wedged itself between the mirror and the wall, barely visible. I pulled it out. It was another drawaway, but longer. Stretched almost impossible. And at the end of it, a door half open. From its shadow, a red scarf extended across the floor like a trail. On the back of the drawing were 3 words, "Follow the quiet." I didn't sleep that night either. In the morning, the sounds returned. The fridge hummed. Cars honked outside. My clock resumed its normal ticking. But something inside me had changed. Like a door left ajar in the back of my mind. I started seeing red out of the corner of my eye, not the scarf. Just red. In reflections, in puddles, in taillights lingering too long in the distance. It was always moving, sliding just beyond reach. I began tracking the apartment's sounds, writing down when the mirror clicked or the walls shifted. I discovered a pattern. Every time the ticking stopped, the mirror would make a small sound, a click like a lock turning. I began timing these. They happened every 9:37 seconds, always exactly. I set up a small recorder next to the mirror, captured a few of the clicks, played them back. On the third playback, the audio distorted and a voice bled through the static. Not clearly, but enough. It whispered a name. Lena. I hadn't said her name aloud since the apology. I didn't know the recorder had picked it up, but there it was, like she was answering me, or waiting for me to say it again. I began speaking to the mirror, softly, not pleading, just acknowledging, telling stories I remembered. How she used to hum to herself when she cooked, how she painted over old canvases like they didn't deserve to exist, how she always left the window cracked open, no matter the season. The mirror never responded, but the air grew warmer each time. Less oppressive, the scent changed too, from perfume and ozone to something softer, paint and chamomile. One night, I heard music, a violin, faint and trembling, not from the hallway, from inside the mirror. I pressed my ear to the glass again. This time, I didn't hear breathing. I heard footsteps, soft ones, pacing, waiting, then a whisper, "Come see." I pulled away, my heart racing. On the wall next to the mirror, new writing had appeared, faint as dust. A question, "Will you open it this time?" The frame had no latches, no seams, but the surface had grown warmer, almost pliable. I pushed. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to give up, I felt a slight give beneath my fingertips, like pressing against flesh. The mirror didn't open, but something passed through. A new drawing fell to the floor from the top of the frame, drifting like a feather. It showed my living room. Empty, except for the sketchbook on the table and a red scarf curled around it like a snake. The timestamp in the corner read, "Now." I stepped back into the living room. The sketchbook was gone. So was the scarf. In their place, a small box, wrapped in paper that shimmered silver under the light. I didn't remember putting it there. I didn't own anything like it. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, a key, not to the apartment, to something older, heavy, ornate, carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Beneath it, a slip of paper. Downstairs, behind the boiler, I knew the place, the building's basement, always locked, always marked, authorized maintenance only. I took the key and descended the stairs, each step echoing deeper than seemed possible. At the basement door, the key fit. Of course it did. The door opened into darkness. I flicked on the light. The bulbs flickered. Dim. The air was cold and smelled of rust and wet stone. I stepped inside. The boiler stood massive and hissing in the corner. Behind it, a wall of cracked tile. I ran my hand across it and found the edge of a panel. Pried it loose. Behind it, another door, smaller, older, metal. The same symbol carved into the key. I unlocked it. Inside was a narrow corridor descending, stone steps, bare walls, and at the bottom, a single door painted red. My heart pounded. I descended slowly, each step colder than the last. At the base, I paused. The red door had no handle, just a brass plate etched with the word, "Return." I touched it. The metal pulsed, and then the door opened inward on its own. What I saw beyond it wasn't a room. It was a mirror, not glass, but lippling, shimmering, reflecting not my face, but hers. Lena, oldered, wearing the scarf, holding the sketchbook. She smiled, not crudely, just knowingly, and she mouthed two words, "Finish it." I stepped forward, not knowing if I was stepping into water, glass, or something else entirely. But I knew there was no turning back. The door closed behind me, and the red scarf fluttered to the ground, waiting for its next bearer. It felt like stepping through memory, liquid and warm yet unnervingly still. The moment I passed the red threshold, the world lost all weight. Sound vanished. My breath hung in my throat, unspilled. The light shifted, but not like from a bulb or sun. It came from nowhere, a faint ambient glow, like the aftermath of lightning flashing behind your eyes. I stood in a hallway that shouldn't have existed. It mirrored the layout of my apartment building, but it was wrong in all the ways that mattered. The walls pulsed subtly as though the building had veins instead of wiring. The carpet underfoot was plush but felt wet, like walking across soaked pages. The air smelled of lavender and scorched wires, a jarring contradiction that made my skin prickle. I turned to glance back, hoping to see the red door or at least the steps that led me here, but there was nothing. Only a long stretch of hallway vanishing into shadows. No doors. No windows, just the sound of my heartbeat thudding louder than it ever had before. Then, faintly, came music, not like the violin I'd heard through the mirror. This was slower, deeper, a cello perhaps. The notes carried sorrow and resolve, weaving through the corridor like smoke. I followed the sound because there was nothing else to do. It led me forward, always forward, the hallway shifting subtly with each step. The floor tilted ever so slightly, the walls curved in odd places. Doors appeared and vanished when I blinked. It was a dream, yes, but one I couldn't wake from. I passed rooms that didn't open but whispered. One muttered my name in Lena's voice, over and over like a chant. Another sobbed softly. Another pulsed red beneath its frame as though bleeding light. I didn't dare open any of them. Not yet. The cello music grew louder, clearer. It was coming from behind a door marked 7B. Of course it was. The number was carved into the wood, not painted. Below it, a symbol I now recognized, the same etched into the key from the box, the same woven into the scarf's pattern. A twisted loop, Ouroboros, but shaped like a floor plan folding in on itself. I reached for the knob. It turned easily. The door opened into my old apartment, or something that wore its shape. Everything was familiar but slightly off, as if someone had recreated it from memory and missed the finer details. The couch was the wrong color, the kettle too modern, the books stacked in odd, unreadable titles. And sitting at the window was Lena. She didn't look surprised. Her scarf was wrapped loosely around her neck, her hair pulled back just as she'd worn it in the last days. Her skin was paler now, almost translucent, but her eyes were burning with a light I'd never seen before. Not anger, not love, something older, recognition perhaps. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. It didn't make a sound. She gestured to the seat across from her. I sat. We didn't speak. There were no words, but something passed between us in that silence, like an exchange long overdue. She reached for the sketchbook and opened it to a blank page. Then she slid it to me along with a pencil. I stared at it, confused. She tilted her head like she was waiting. So I drew. I didn't question it. I let my hand move. I didn't choose what I was drawing, but the lines flowed easily, like they'd been inside me all along. When I finished, I looked down and saw a door. The one I'd just walked through, except now it was open, and inside it was a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Lena looked at it and nodded once. Then she stood and walked toward the hallway. I followed her. We left the apartment and returned to the impossible corridor, now shorter, narrower. A single door remained at the end, metal rusted, humming slightly. The symbol above it glowed faintly. She didn't touch the door. She looked at me. Her lips moved again, and though I heard no sound, I knew what she was saying. Go alone. I wanted to ask why, to understand, but she stepped backward into the dark and disappeared. The door opened. Inside the staircase from my drawing. I descended. The steps were narrow and slick, the air growing colder with every rotation. I couldn't tell how long I walked. Time had no place here. At the bottom, I entered a circular room. A gallery. Its walls were covered in sketches, thousands of them, all drawn in the same style, the same hand. Mine. Each page depicted moments from my life. Moments I remembered, and others I didn't. Some showed me in places I had never visited, doing things I never did. Others showed people I'd never met, but who looked back at me from the page with haunting familiarity. In the center of the gallery stood a pedestal. On it the scarf, not folded, not waiting, suspended mid-air, twisting slowly. Around it, mirrors lined the wall, each one reflecting different versions of me. Not symbolic versions, literal ones. One wore a suit and held a phone. Another crouched in a corner, bruised and sobbing. Another sat in a cell. Another painted frantically, the walls around him covered in symbols. I turned to face the scarf. My reflection did not move. All the others did. Simultaneously, they stepped forward, pressed their hands against the glass. My reflection stood still, watching. I reached for the scarf. The moment I touched it, the mirrors shattered. Every single one. A soundless explosion of glass and light. The reflections did not disappear. They stepped out, surrounding me. Waiting. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. I understood. These were the other versions of me. The lives I could have lived, or did live, or still might. This place wasn't punishment. It was reckoning. The scarf flared in my hand, pulsed once, and then tightened. It wrapped itself around my wrist like a tether. The others moved closer. One stepped forward. Me, but not quite. His eyes were hollow. He opened his mouth and spoke. You forgot, but forgetting doesn't unmake what was done. Another stepped forward. Lena. Not a memory. A mirror version. She stood behind me now, hand on my shoulder. Her grip was firm. You wore it, she whispered. You always wore it, even when you claimed you didn't. I collapsed to my knees. Not in grief. In clarity. I remembered not just her fall, but everything after. I remembered staying in the apartment long after the police stopped asking questions. I remembered drawing obsessively, filling sketchbooks and burning them. I remembered looking into mirrors and seeing other faces, other versions of me slipping through. I had done this before. Many times, I had stepped through that red door in more than one life. Each time I forgot. Each time I returned. But the scarf remained. It always found its way back. A constant. A thread weaving the narratives together. Bunding the timelines. Marking me. One of the reflections held up a key. Not to the apartment. To something deeper. Final. He tossed it to me. I caught it instinctively. The pedestal cracked. A hole opened in the center of the gallery floor. A dark descent. I looked around one last time. Lena was gone. The other versions of me were gone. I was alone again. Just me. And the scarf. And the key. I stepped into the hole. The fall was soundless. Endless. Until it wasn't. I landed in water. Cold still. Waist deep. In front of me, a wall of mirrors. But these didn't show me. They showed others. Everyone who had ever lived in the apartment. Every tenant. Every death. Every disappearance. Some had worn the scarf. Others had burned it. Some had never seen it and still suffered. One by one, their eyes met mine. And then they vanished. The final mirror held an image of my building. Real this time. Undistorted. A single window glowed red. My old unit. And the scarf hung there waiting. The mirror cracked. A voice echoed from within. Tell it right this time. I woke on my apartment floor, soaked, shivering. The scarf was gone. The sketchbook empty. The mirror in the hallway shattered completely. But on the wall behind it, carved deep into the plaster, were the words I now knew by heart. You wore it last time. Only this time, beneath it, a new phrase had been added. But now you remember. The moment I realized I was truly back in the apartment. Back in my world, or at least some version of it. I sat still for hours, afraid to move, afraid that any gesture might tilt me into yet another reality I couldn't escape. The air was damp. My clothes clung to my skin. Water pooled beneath me, soaking into the wooden floorboards. But the apartment didn't react. No voices, no whispers, no scent of lavender or electricity, just silence. That was the most terrifying part. For weeks I had lived within tension, noise, movement. Reality warped and humming. Now it was too still. As if something had finished watching me, or left me behind. I tried to stand. My legs were weak. The floor beneath my feet felt uneven, as though the water had warped the wood during my absence, however long it had been. I shuffled toward the hallway, bracing myself against the wall, but stopped at the edge of the mirror, or where it had been. The glass was entirely shattered, not in splinters, but in precise curved fractures radiating from a single impact point, right where my face had reflected the last time I looked. I leaned in. Beneath the shards, the surface wasn't plaster or wood, it was stone, polished and cold to the touch, like the walls in the gallery beneath the apartment. The apartment was changing, or revealing what it had always been. On the opposite wall, where once only white paint existed, there was now a mural, drawn in charcoal. Sprawling, detailed, alive. I knew the hand that made it. Mine. I didn't remember drawing it, but every stroke, every line, every shadow was familiar. It depicted a labyrinth, not symbolic but architectural. Rooms and stairwells, passageways and vaults. And at the very center, a circle enclosing the scarf. Around the edge of the mural, words curled like ivy. You cannot unmake what you draw. I stumbled backward and caught a glimpse of the living room mirror. Not cracked, not fogged, but different. It no longer reflected my face. It showed the mural behind me, but slightly altered. In the mirror's version, the scarf was missing from the center. In its place, an open eye. Red. Bleeding. Watching. I turned to confirm. The real mural still held the scarf, but now I wasn't sure which one was truly real. My body ached in ways I couldn't explain. Like my muscles remembered actions I hadn't taken yet. I checked my phone. Dead, of course. I plugged it in and waited. When it finally powered up, it showed no missed calls, no messages. But my photo album had changed. In place of my old pictures, there were sketches, pages from the sketchbook, and each one was tagged with a location. 7B, 70C, 3A, 40DE, not just this apartment. Others units throughout the building. I swiped further. Each photo was a different room, a different scarf, some scorched, some nailed to the wall, some wrapped around necks, lifeless, expressionless necks. One image showed me standing in apartment 40C, smiling at someone outside the frame. I had never been inside 40C, not to my knowledge, but there I was. I knew what this meant. I hadn't escaped the loop. I had crossed into its next phase. The scarf hadn't disappeared, it had multiplied, replicated across units like a contagion, like a ritual passed down through walls and tenants. The apartment wasn't a single place, it was a hive, a collection of doors, each opening to another version, another timeline, another test. And I had drawn the map. I picked up the sketchbook from the floor. Its cover was smooth now, untouched, no scratches, no blood, just my name. Inside, every page was blank again, except for one. The final one. A new message was scrawled in red ink, shaky but deliberate. There's one more floor. I froze. The basement had felt final. The gallery, the staircase, the liquid mirror. It had all felt like an ending. But the sketchbook disagreed. I traced the words of my finger, half expecting them to vanish. They didn't. Instead, the wall beside me vibrated faintly, a low hum, like power surging through circuits. I moved toward it. The hum grew louder. My closet door creaked open. I hadn't touched it. Inside, behind the coats and boxes, the back panel had shifted, revealing a handle I'd never seen before. Cold steel. It didn't match the apartment's aesthetic. I pulled it. The panel slid aside with a mechanical hiss. Behind it, a narrow spiral staircase descending into total blackness. It smelled like ash and metal. I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to go, that this wasn't part of the building, that I had already gone too far, but the words echoed in my head. There's one more floor. I couldn't stop now. I stepped through. The staircase was tight. My shoulders scraped the walls. My breath clouded the air as the temperature dropped. I descended for what felt like hours, until the darkness gave way to a dull red glow. A room awaited me, larger than anything should have fit beneath this building. It was circular, hollow, lined with mirrors from floor to ceiling, and at the center a pillar. On top of it, the scarf, twisting slowly in an unseen wind. I stepped forward. The mirrors showed nothing but me. Dozens of me, all moving in sync, all afraid. But as I reached the center, the reflections changed. Each one began to fracture into scenes, visions. In one, I saw Lena standing in the gallery, her hands covered in ink. In another, she was drowning in the bathtub, the scarf coiling around her wrists like shackles. In another, she was drawing me, over and over again, until the pencil broke. I looked away. The pillar vibrated slightly. I reached for the scarf. My hand stopped inches from it. A whisper curled through the room, not from outside, but from inside my head. "Take it, and it begins again." I pulled my hand back. My reflection did not. In the mirrors, all versions of me grabbed the scarf. All at once, the room erupted in red light. The reflections shattered. I stood alone, but the scarf remained. It hadn't moved. It was waiting. I reached again. This time, I took it. The fabric burned my palm. Not fire, but memory. Every life I'd lived, every lie I'd told, every time I had forgotten. It flooded me. Lena screaming, Meaden running, me creating false versions, drawing myself innocent, hiding behind art, blaming the scarf, blaming the mirror, blaming her. I collapsed. The scarf slithered up my arm, wrapping tight around my neck. I couldn't breathe. I clawed at it. Darkness swallowed the room. But the moment I stopped struggling, when I accepted it, it loosened, fell away. I gasped. And when I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the mirror room. I was back in my apartment. Everything was as I'd first found it. Boxes unpacked. Kettle cold. Mirror whole. No scarf. No mural. But something had changed. I looked at my reflection. It blinked. A second too late. I blinked again. It didn't. Instead, it smiled. And I understood. I had passed through the door too many times. The loop didn't need to pull me back anymore. I was the anchor now. The scarf wouldn't find me again. I would find others. I would be the knock, the red thread in the corner of the eye. The reflection just slightly wrong. Because the scarf never leaves. It only changes shape. It becomes the storyteller. And now the apartment waits for someone new to move in. To see the strange crack in the mirror. To hear the soft sound of breathing behind the wall. And when they find the scarf, when they wear it without knowing what it means, I'll be there. In the frame. Watching. Smiling. The apartment feels colder now, though I don't notice it most days. The heating works, the walls haven't changed, and the kettle still clicks on when I fill it with water. Everything operates as it should, down to the last quiet detail. But the warmth is gone. Not from the air, but from time. Time no longer folds gently here. It splits, fractures, glides sideways through the cracks I created. I walk through it without resistance, without alarm. I see things before they happen, sometimes after they've already ended. I speak aloud and hear my own voice answer me from across the room with words I haven't said yet. The scarf is gone, truly gone, and yet it isn't. It no longer drapes across the furniture or coils in my drawer, but I feel its weight inside me now, woven into my lungs like threads of memory spun too tight to ever unspool. The scarf doesn't need to be worn. I became it. Or it became me. There's no line to distinguish anymore. Most days I remain silent. I don't open the sketchbook, not because I fear it, but because I already know what's in it. The pages draw themselves now, quietly turning as though caught in a breeze that doesn't exist. New tenants move into the building. Some last weeks, others only days. They pass me in the stairwell and smile politely, unaware. But their eyes always linger on me a second too long, as if something itches behind their awareness, something whispering, "He's not quite part of this place." And they're right. I'm not. I am the place now. When they leave, they never pack properly. A shoe under the couch. A pair of sunglasses on the window ledge. A toothbrush resting quietly in the cup. One woman left behind a child's red ribbon. I placed it gently into the mirror drawer. The mirror accepts things now. Not all things. Only ones tied to memory. To guilt. To forgetting. The drawer has no bottom. I've checked. Dropped a coin once and never heard it land. Some part of me thinks that's where Lena is. Not trapped. Not lost. Just beyond the remembering. I think about her more now. Not as the woman I failed or the woman I forgot, but as the echo I carry. The resonance in my hands when I draw, the reason I pause before I speak, the hush in my chest before I blink. She's still painting somewhere. In some loop. Some floor deeper than I ever reached. I wonder what she sees now when she paints me. Does she see the version I became? Or the version I could have been if none of this had happened? Sometimes I feel her watching me through reflections that don't belong. A spoon bent the wrong way. A teacup with two shadows. The gleam of a subway window that never reflects the crowd behind me. Always her eyes. Waiting, maybe not for me, maybe for the next. Because the apartment continues to grow. The rooms swell beneath the foundation. I hear footsteps under the floorboards. New ones. Heavy, uncertain, afraid. Some nights I wake to the sound of scratching inside the walls. Not rats. Not pipes. Fingernails against old plaster. Sometimes laughter. Sometimes crying. Always familiar. Always mine. Because I left pieces of myself in every room I walked through. Every timeline, every mirror. When I touched the scarf and accepted it, I didn't just remember, I duplicated. Fragments of thought and guilt branched off, seeded into reflections, planted themselves like roots. I am the tenant in 7B, the man who never left 40C, the boy who drowned in 2E, the stranger who knocks at 3 each morning at 6-43, the father who forgot, the lover who denied, the artist who lied. And all of them live here now, in me, in walls that breathe my breath and bleed my dreams. But still I write, every day. I wake and sit at the desk, the old wooden one I pulled from the basement, the one with the drawer that squeals like a trapped animal when opened. I take a fresh sheet of paper. I draw what I saw the night before. Always something new. A door with 12 handles. A man made of reflection shards. A woman wrapped in negatives, fluttergraphs that flutter like feathers. Sometimes I write instead, not stories. Not anymore. Maps, codes. Instructions for those who come next. I slide them under the door of the next apartment. Sometimes I tape them behind mirrors in the laundry room or leave them folded inside books in the lobby's little free library. Most people don't find them. But one man did. He lived in 5th B. He found one of my drawings and knocked on my door that night. Asked if I had ever seen a room that had no light but still cast shadows. I let him in. We talked. He drank tea, told me about the red thread he saw on his ceiling at night, how it drifted and curled into shapes, forming a face that looked like his sister, even though she'd been gone for years. I listened. I didn't tell him everything, but I gave him a page from the sketchbook, one of the old ones. I watched him leave with it tucked under his arm. He never returned. The next day, his apartment was empty. The key was left dangling in the lock. No one saw him go, but I know where he went. I saw his reflection in the hallway mirror 2 nights later. He blinked out of time, smiled, and mouthed the words I once heard myself, "Tell it right this time." And so the loop continues, not in punishment, but in offering. This building doesn't seek justice. It doesn't demand apologies. It offers clarity, cruel and precise. It removes the veil. It exposes what we hide even from ourselves. And when we break beneath the weight of it, the scarf finds another throat to wrap around, not choke, but to tether. Anchor remind. The scarf doesn't kill. It remembers. That's its true power. Memory. Not as nostalgia, but as consequence. When you put it on, you invite the truth. And truth does not let go. The door to the basement reappeared last night. I hadn't seen it in weeks. The same cold handle, the same steps spiraling down into the dark. I know what waits below. A new gallery. New mirrors. New versions of me gathering like moths to the flame of memory. They want to be seen. They want to be drawn. They want to be told. So tonight I will go down again. Not to escape. Not to be free. But to witness. To write. To record what the scarf cannot carry alone. I have become the archivist of the apartment. The one who catalogs every fracture, every knock, every tenant swallowed whole. This is not a haunting. This is an unfolding. And I am the narrator. The hallway grows longer every time I open my door now. More units appear, ones that never existed before. 7AC. Naya, each one a door to a new memory. A new spiral. A new version of guilt dressed as coincidence. And I will visit them. All of them. Until I find the final room. The one where she's waiting, not to punish, not even to forgive. Just to be remembered without distortion. And when I stand in that room, when I face her and hold no pages, no pencils, no lies, only the memory as it truly was, I will speak her name one last time, and if she speaks mine in return, maybe the scarf will finally unravel. Maybe. Or maybe the story will begin again. For someone else. A new tenant. A new knock. A new red thread curling out from the mirror like a beckoning hand. And when it does, they'll open the door, read the story, hear the voice, and find me not as a person, but as a presence. In the wall, in the mirror, in the hush between footsteps, and they will know the truth. The scarf never wanted to hurt anyone. It just needed someone to remember. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.